Our segment today is how do you make the transition from entrepreneurial company to a professional company? This is a stage in the life cycle. Entrepreneurial company is the go-go company, and we covered it in another segment of this program. And a go-go company gets into trouble. And that's usually what provokes a request for transitioning to a professional company. Up to that point, it's very difficult to make the transition because the leader of a go-go company is considered to be a genius. He made his company grow tremendously every year. People are scared of what he's doing, but you don't argue with results. The company is growing 35, 50, 100% a year. So he's a genius. How can we argue with him? And the board of directors is enchanted with this extroverted, creative person, and they don't fight with him until the company gets into trouble. And then all at once, from being a genius, it turns out to be a madman. It turns out to be an unguided missile. Somebody we need to control and we don't know how to control, and is uncontrollable. And it overnight turns from an asset to becoming a liability. And at that stage, there is a very interesting phenomena. This is the stage of moving to adolescence. This is the adolescent stage of the life cycle. So, from entrepreneurial management to professional management, this is a transition. This is also in political science, it's called from absolute monarchy to constitutional monarchy. And sometimes the transition is not to constitutional monarchy, it is to republic. What does it mean? They chop the king's head off, and now they abolish monarchy. This is a fight. This is when the system gets separated from its founders. When it's not true anymore, l'état, c'est moi. It's not true that the king says, the state is me. Me and the state is one of the things. In the go-go stage of the life cycle, I'm the founder and the company is me. I and the company is one and the same. That's why in the go-go company, one of the problems is that if they go public, the founder ignores the fact it's a public company. Some kind of psychologically still believes it is his company. And all these investors are, well, we have to satisfy them, but really they're not relevant. What's relevant is what I want. He treats the company like his own. That's why he can get into trouble of abusing his power for his own benefit because he still believes it's his own company. He started this company, he built this company, and when the stockholders sue him, he doesn't know what happened. He just gets totally flabbergasted. Something is wrong here. He doesn't realize that l'état, ce n'est pas moi. The state is not me. That transition, when the separation occurs, is like a separation in a family. When the children are teenagers, they're not called children anymore, they're called monsters. Why? Because they're getting separated. There is a division going on here. They're starting their own life. They're starting to be independent. And that's why this is another disruptive point here. Very difficult. This is the birth, and this is the second birth, when the company is getting separated from its founders or the family. And if the company cannot make the transition, they fall into what's called the founder's trap or the family trap. And on average, the tradition says it takes about 3 generations for the company to go under in a family trap. And why there is a trap? Because the family has not made the transition from ownership to management. They're still going management by ownership rather than by talent or capabilities. That separation is what made capitalism successful, the separation of management from ownership through the stock market. And as long as we don't make that separation, the company can fall into a trap, which means when the founder or the family dies, the company dies. Here it gets institutionalized, it's professionalized, and it's not dependent on any single individual for its success. Well, this transition is a very complicated one. Very complicated one. It has several difficulties. Let's see what the difficulties are. First of all, there is a change in leadership needed here. From here to here, the leader that you need is a creative, entrepreneurial, task-oriented doer. It's a fire brigade and an arsonist in one same person. He starts the fires and extinguishes them. Next fire extinguishes them. He's building a company. Very entrepreneurial, very task-oriented, doer, relatively big ego, needs a big ego to build a company, to dedicate your energy to build a company. Here the transition is now to somebody who is not now looking outside, but who is going to be looking inside. Somebody says, wow, hold a second. We need law and order. We need some organization here. We need some systems here. We need now to pay attention to our cost structure. We are rushing like crazy over the hill. We need, and now the energy turns inwards because the company has outpaced itself. There is a change in the leadership requirements. And if the leader who started the company, who is a leader in GoGo, cannot make the transition, usually he has to be squeezed out, fired, and a new executive be brought in. And if he does stay, which is always what we do in companies, we want the entrepreneur to stay. We don't want to lose the energy that is pumping blood into the system. It's very dangerous to get rid of the entrepreneur. The idea is how to move the entrepreneur to a CEO role, chairman CEO, and move the administrative type who is organized into president COO role and how they work together. This pointing the direction, and this is taking care of the inside, so it works efficiently, and there is some cost orientation and some detail orientation, so we do not fall by the wayside because of not paying attention to the details. So there is a leadership change here. Not everybody likes to change positions. Founders usually like to hold on to. And you know what happens? I've seen extreme cases, pathological cases, where the founder, because he cannot control the company anymore, he starts killing the company. He starts destroying the company. He has all kinds of wonderful reasons why he's doing that, which are very, high level. But when you really look at the details, what he's doing is destroying the company. I've seen it in my professional work with some prime ministers, and this is the case of Milosevic, about which I wrote. And I met the person, and I was invited to help Yugoslavia not to fall apart in '91, and I realized here is another person who would rather destroy the country if he cannot control it. So this is a dangerous stage. How do we make this transition? How do we make the transition? So the first challenge here is changing leadership style. Not getting rid, but changing the engines, What else do you have to change? You have to change the goals. Here the goal is cash flow. They will do anything for cash flow because they're growing. Here the goal is sales, market share. Here the goal should be what? Profits. We're spending too much money. The sales are going up, the profits are going down. We have to now become profit-oriented. But the change from sales orientation to profit orientation is not an easy one. You need to have cost counting. You have to know what you're doing. You need to have information. And the information not be available because the organization is so scattered and disorganized and maybe even geographically all dispersed. It's very difficult to get your hands around the information. What else has to change here? The strategies. If you change the goal, the strategies have to change. Here the goal was market share. Profitability was a constraint. You don't want to lose money, but there was the profitability. Market share. Here you want profitability, but what happened to the market share? Don't ignore it. Now what you have to make is market share be a constrained goal. You don't want to have less than market share as you're changing the organization internally to be more profit-oriented. What else is changing? The structure. Here the structure is all around the founder, usually functional organizational structure, because it's very centralized. Now that we're becoming more professional, you should have multiple profit centers. You should develop the next layer of leaders to lead the company and to institutionalize entrepreneurial spirit in multiple places in the organization rather than monopolized in a single individual like it's in a go-go.